Hey everybody, Dr. Nick here. Just finished recording another episode of the Hospitality Spirit podcast. My guest today was Marcus Cornelious. Marcus is the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Sheraton Grand in Chicago, where he's been since 2016. During our conversation, we covered a lot of topics, including his career path, a week in the life of the Director of Sales and Marketing, both pre and during COVID, and he offered some advice for students hoping to get into sales and marketing. I hope you enjoy this episode. Good afternoon, everybody. Dr. Nick here with the Hospitality Spirit. I'm so excited to be joined today by Marcus Cornelious. Marcus is the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Sheraton Grand here in Chicago. He's been in that role since 2016. Prior to that, he was the Director of Sales and Marketing for W Hotel in New York in Union Square. Marcus has over 15 years of experience in the hospitality industry. He currently resides in Chicago, Illinois with his family. Marcus, thanks for being here today.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Marcus, why don't we kind of start off in the traditional way, which we start out with all the guests on the Hospitality Spirit. Why don't you kind of tell us a little bit about your current role as Director of Sales and Marketing for the Sheraton Grand here in Chicago?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm responsible for all sales, marketing, public relations efforts for the entire hotel. And from a sales standpoint, to kind of what that means, is sometimes when I tell people that I work in sales for a hotel, they'll say to me, "Oh, you sell weddings." And that is true, in some senses. Yes, that is one of the many areas of one area that we host at our hotels, but large conventions, big venues, and the way that they're able to be transformed for a variety of different needs, not only just weddings.
Mm-hmm.
So responsible for all of those efforts, and then all of the public relations and marketing efforts to help keep our hotel visible and top of mind to the entire world.
And in terms of, for those people that live in Chicago, they're probably pretty familiar with it. It's an iconic property right along the Chicago River, beautiful property,
Yeah.
Very large property, one of the largest here in Chicago.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about, though, for those that are listening that maybe are not as familiar with your property, just some real quick pertinent facts and figures from number of rooms. I believe you have one of the largest, if not the largest, pillarless ballroom in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe some details like that would be helpful.
Yeah, we'd be happy to. So we have 1,218 guest rooms. We're the third largest hotel in the city of Chicago. As you mentioned, we have also the largest pillarless ballroom in Chicago at 40,000 square feet. And to put that into perspective, it's essentially the size of a football field. So we have really a unique advantage there, having the largest ballroom space, and it allows us to really host some really large, magnificent events at the hotel. We're situated right along the river walk along the Chicago River. We also have a really fantastic exhibit hall. It's the only exhibit hall that is above ground with river walk access. Just a really special property. I could probably go on for quite a while about it.
It is. It's one of my favorite, and you guys have been a great supporter of ours at the School of Hospitality Leadership at DePaul, whether it's interns, hiring our alums, management training program, members of our advisory board. We've had some of our big celebrations of distinction events there at the hotel. So, really great partner of ours. So I'm excited to have you on the podcast today. You've been in hospitality, though, for quite a long time. I mean, 15 years, and you've worked at really some great properties throughout the U.S. Maybe just a brief summary of your career up to this point, and then we can transition to maybe kind of how you got into sales.
Yeah, I would be happy to. I feel like, when you try and summarize 15 years, I'm like, oh man, geez, when I hear that, sometimes I'm like, oh man, I can't believe it's been that long. Each year tends to go by faster and faster. I started out my career working at the front desk at the Hilton Chicago, another great hotel, an iconic hotel in Chicago. Worked at the front desk while I was going to school, and at the time I was going to school, at Kendall College, studying hospitality, and I, I really, I really just enjoyed it as I'll say kind of a part-time gig, making some good money. And I was fortunate. I think there was just a great team there that allowed me to work in different departments within the hotel. And I really started to see a future for myself permanently within the hotels. And I remember, I guess maybe going back about 15 years, having this dream to become a general manager. So I had the fortunate opportunity to work in operations for Hilton for a number of years while I was studying in college. And then once I graduated, I went into a more formalized management trainee program where I took on a little bit more of a managerial role in the operational jobs. And I was just about finished, and I was doing my second to last rotation, I should say, in catering. And at the time, the director of catering there, he had given me a long list. I just remember kind of like had printed something out and gave me a list of contacts and said, hey, pick up the phone and can you start cold calling these people trying to book a holiday party? And I didn't really know what all of that meant exactly. And I was like, just asking questions, help me kind of understand, what do I say, what do I talk about? And he gave me some good advice. And I feel like I wish I could almost remember, because I probably would make the story even a little bit better. But I took that and I was pretty successful. And he was impressed. And my last stop was, I hadn't gone over to sales yet. And so before I went over there, he picked up the phone and called the person that was leading the sales team for the Hiltons of Chicago that represents several hotels, or at the time they represented several hotels in Chicago, and said, hey, I think this person that's coming over might have a little bit of a knack for sales. You should really, throw him in and let him see what he can do. So a couple of weeks later, I went over there, and they didn't throw me in. They had me doing a lot of administrative work at the beginning, but eventually an opportunity presented itself for me to get on what I guess I would say kind of the entry level sales team. And I was representing, I believe it was 6 hotels between the convention hotels, the Hilton Chicago and the Palmer House, and then some of the luxury and the O'Hare product as well. So it was the Conrad, the Drake, Hilton O'Hare, and then also Embassy Suites.
It's interesting. So it really is a scenario where, you went through, and we talk about this a lot with our students as they're kind of thinking about their career options, is these management training programs with these hotel companies or even restaurant companies or similar organizations. They're incredibly valuable because part of it is also about self-exploration for you as the recent graduate to go around and have a little sampling of all the different areas. And by chance, you kind of towards the end of your program, you stumbled into sales, not thinking that that's what you wanted to do when you first got out. And I followed a similar route. I've talked about it on the podcast before, where like you, I wanted to be a GM. And I thought the way to do that was to work up through hotel options. So start at the front desk, and then, start as a front desk agent, work your way to assistant manager and rooms division manager and up. But these rotational programs are so valuable because a lot of times the curriculums that we have are relatively general in school, but it's getting out there and seeing what the different options are that kind of have that spark. And it seems like that's what happened with you.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there. I think there is this, going into hotels, I think there is kind of this glamour in some ways of becoming the general manager of the hotel. And I think that is an admirable job. I have a lot of respect. I mean, I've really enjoyed, and I've learned a lot from all the GMs that I have worked for. But that specific path, just I came to kind of find out wasn't necessarily for me. But I will say that I believe that my career as a salesperson flourished because of the time that I spent in operations.
Sure.
And I really was able to gain a really good understanding of how every department works. And I have such appreciation and admiration for what every single department does in order to make the entire unit work successfully.
And it's that it's not just what they do, but it's how it's all interconnected.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
you're
how the
absolutely right.
balance of housekeeping and, and there's always friendly rivalries between the two departments. I mean, 2:30 on a Friday, the front desk is calling down housekeeping saying we need more rooms, we need more rooms, we need more rooms, and
Yeah.
housekeeping is responding, we're getting them clean as fast as we can. It'd be better if you didn't have check-ins. So there always is that kind of fun interplay, but there is that interconnected nature of it. So, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about a career in hospitality, yeah, it's incredibly admirable to kind of stay in one department and work your way up within that department, but really spreading your wings and learning about how they are all interconnected will
Hmm.
benefit you tremendously. And that means going and spending some
Hmm.
time in housekeeping. That means maybe spending some time over in F&B or behind the scenes in revenue management or
Hmm.
sales, different directions that you can go. So Marcus, you've been in the hospitality industry for about 15 years and you've really experienced, if we look at that, the past 15 years,
Yeah.
some turbulent times. I mean, that's the global financial crisis. We're kind of going through this COVID pandemic right now. What are some things that keep you grounded during these kind of turbulent times in a sales kind of capacity? What's some advice that you'd pass along to people in similar
It's a great
positions?
question. I guess I I would say just professionally and personally, I tend to always be a little bit optimistic. I think that's a healthy state of
Hmm.
mind, to just remain optimistic. And as you mentioned, we've gone through a number of different um, crises in some way or another, and even well before my time. And we've always managed to come out of it. And the few that I've worked through, I've definitely just from a sale, I'll say probably specifically from a sales perspective, um, is that our partners, our clients that we do business with, we really take time to um, maintain the relationship that we have,
Hmm.
and um, really honor that relationship. It can be, or I should say, it is difficult right now, and our partners are going through a tough time, and so we really just we work with them to find common ground and the best way to work with them to help them through a very difficult time. But
Hmm.
having that relationship and really just uh, fostering that and nurturing it is what has, I would say, helped us, or helped me even as a sales professional, survive some of these. Yeah, I think, as you said, these difficult times that we've gone
That's
through.
great advice. So I'd like to, if we could, Marcus, I'd like to really compare and contrast two periods of time. And I like to ask about a week in the life.
Mm.
Because if, in many cases, somebody's listening to this episode and they're like, you know what, I really want to go into sales. Like Marcus is in that position or with an organization that I'd like to be in 5, 10, 15 years.
Hmm.
I'd like to just get a sense maybe of what a week in the life for you is like. And I'm doing air quotes right now around the word normal. So I like in a normal week.
Yeah,
Let's go last year. If we're looking last year, right around this time, Air and Water Show just ended. Everything's going great. What's a
yeah.
week in the life of a director of sales at one of the largest hotels in the city look like? And then maybe juxtapose that with what's a week in the life now at the Sheraton Grand looking like as you're
Oh,
in the middle
yeah,
of COVID?
yeah.
And what are some things that you're doing to build confidence in the guest that you and your fellow associates are kind of dealing with on a day-to-day basis in your sales team?
Yeah. All right. Those are to unpack here. And I'm glad that you asked that first question, because I feel like the current state that we're in, you almost forget to reflect back and remember those good times, I guess I should say, because right now it's tough. But let's definitely
lots of good times during the air and water show, except
yeah,
for the
exactly.
sunburn that inevitably happens.
But good to start there. I would say every week is definitely a little bit different. I had a director of revenue management that I worked with once that said it's a 52-week boxing match. That's kind of how we would
Great analogy.
describe our roles, and that is true. And he would really use that reference as we're talking about the STAR report. The STAR report being one of the things that, from a sales and revenue standpoint, what we're judged on, what our company uses as kind of a report card, if you will. Our ownership uses as a report card, and how well we are in essentially getting our fair share of business that is coming into the city of Chicago based on what we feel is a comp set, a reasonable comp set of hotels that we compete against. So, I think to try and summarize that, pre-COVID times, or post the Air and Water Show, as you had said, a week looks like, I would say probably 70 to 80% of my time is typically spent being a mentor, a coach, a cheerleader to the sales team that I oversee.
That's really fantastic to think about. And I want to just pause there. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But that idea is, if you're listening to this, just recently, we had another guest on, Omari Head, with Paramount Lodging. And he said that that's probably one of the single most important things that he finds value now in a leader, and that has benefited him the most, is that idea of mentorship and coaching. I don't think and people are like, well, it's kind of odd. You would think that 70, 80% of your job is sales and going out and bringing in the customer. But in this case, your internal customer, your colleagues or your associates are one of the most important priorities you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I'll tell a really quick story, because in my first role as the director of sales and marketing, I was the director of sales and marketing at the W in Union Square, and went into that role. And just as you said, I kind of didn't have my footing right. I didn't know what to expect. And I thought that I needed to your point, just, be selling, running reports, really kind of just still what I knew best, kind of me in some ways. But I was working and managing a team, and my boss, probably, maybe a month into it, he came and he gave me some good feedback and said, hey, I'm sure your email box is just flooded. You're getting requests all the time. You have reports to do all the time. But your team is number one. If your team is excelling, will be excelling, and everything else will take care of itself. And that was probably some of the best advice that I received early on. So I, from that point on, took a different approach in the way that I was prioritizing my time, and wanting, and just, I want to be a great leader. I want to make it enjoyable for people to come into work. I enjoy the aspect of teaching, coaching, and mentoring. So that is my, I guess you would say, kind of my leadership style.
Great.
And it's worked out really well. So I spend the majority of my time with the team, really taking care of the team. And then the other 30%, 30, 40%, 30%, 30, 20%, I would say, is spent, there certainly is definitely still an administrative process between just analyzing the market data, and using that to help guide the team. And then also focused on the public relations efforts. And in some ways, really, that's also an internal and external. You talk about the brand and what that brand culture looks like as well inside of the hotel. Sheraton just recently started going through a big brand transformation. So I was really a champion of that internally, and then the marketing efforts for the hotel as well.
So and then we'll get to the second question, kind of a week in the life now.
Yeah.
But back to the very typical week in the life, let's say pre-COVID, what were the main departments that you found yourself interacting with the most? I mean, is it the kind of F&B and event departments? Are you speaking daily with the revenue management team to evaluate RFPs I mean, so what are the big areas that you're working with within your hotel?
Yeah, great question. So revenue management, we're almost connected at the hip.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, we work together and probably spend the most time talking to each other as we're looking at business opportunities, talking about strategies, talking about rates and how we're pricing the hotel, whether it's for group customers, catering customers, just an individual leisure guest that's coming to the hotel. We spend quite a bit of time having those active conversations. I would say number two is probably food and beverage and events. So especially just given kind of the uniqueness of the Sheraton, we really do specialize in those large scale events. We're what I would say is a group hotel. So there's a lot of overlap there, and for everything to go seamlessly, there has to be really good communication. So we spend quite a bit of time, and we actually sit on the same floor between us, sales, revenue management, and events. We're really one big cohesive unit.
Interesting, because I remember, when I was former guest on the podcast, Nate Arkush, used to work with you guys, and Nate and I were talking one day kind of about sales and revenue management, and there's this concept or this idea, and he gave this really interesting example of how to evaluate guests. He says, you might have a group that wants to come in, and it might not be that many room nights, but they're going to spend a ton on F&B. Versus another group that maybe is, let's say, more room nights, but they're teenagers and they're not likely going to go out to the restaurants and the bars. They're going to order in McDonald's. And so it's this balance that you have to face, that more room nights doesn't always necessarily mean more revenue.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the quality of the business, not necessarily the quantity that you're getting.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. As we look at it, every hotel I think has their own target guest, if you will. And for us, we certainly, as we get into a little bit more of a granular level, we have specific industries that we try and target that are, I think to the point you were making, maybe a little bit more profitable. And might be just the right target guest for our hotel.
Sure.
And as I said, that'll vary certainly by hotel.
So here we are. I want to say in the middle of, but we don't really know. So what does this look like now for you? I mean, we've painted a really nice picture, and you've painted a really nice picture of what it's like pre-COVID, but here we are during COVID. We have demand has obviously fluctuated a little bit. Tourism has been impacted a little bit. This is not unique to Chicago. This is not unique to the US. We see this trend existing throughout the world. What does that week now look like for you? And what are some of the things that are on your radar right now that are a priority?
Yeah, so right now it's certainly shifted. There's a lot more time, I think, or I shouldn't say I think, but what's going on right now is this unknown. And as meeting planners are trying to predict, will they be able to bring, I don't know, let's say 1,000 people together safely in 6 months? There's a lot of uncertainty there. And so we spend quite a bit of our time now talking through different scenarios, and those scenarios could be, they might be considering partially what's I'll say a hybrid meeting, so some in person, some virtual, They might be talking about bringing it all virtual, which would kind of, I'll say, terminate the contract. And so in those cases, we'll have the conversation to talk about, well, are you flexible in considering alternative dates and moving your conference to, or looking at another future year?
Mm-hmm.
I would say a good chunk of our time is really now spent around trying to help our customers determine the best path forward for their upcoming events, given there's so much uncertainty of when it's going to be safe to kind of really bring everybody together without any restrictions that we have right now. And then the other part is that we are still seeing, I say all that, and then I'll also say that there is still events that are being planned. We plan and sign events all the way out until 2030.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So there are still there's still demand we actually were just talking about a group just a couple of hours ago that we're going to be doing a virtual site tomorrow for a large group, a corporate client, for September of 2022. We're planning on doing a large incentive trip to Chicago, bringing close to 1,000 people. So, so there is still a lot of proactive sales work that we were doing before. I think it looks a little bit differently than it did before. As I kind of referenced before, that relationship is so key in the way that we approach that. The cold calling kind of mentality, not to say that we really took that approach previously, but it certainly has required us to take just even a little bit more of a different approach now. And I think for everybody, this situation has impacted so many different industries, and knowing that we're all going through something, we don't take the approach of, just pick up the phone and say, hey, let's talk about your next meeting. It's, more just trying to understand how the organization is doing, how they're doing personally. There's also a lot of world events that are impacting people's lives personally. So we really have to empathize and just, as I keep kind of saying, build a relationship with those people. And when they're ready to do business, we're going to be ready to do business with them.
Sure. That's really insightful. And I'm really, there's a lot of optimism in the idea that, you're booking all the way out to 2030, which is really great to hear, not only as a champion of hospitality and tourism, but also as a Chicagoan. That's really great to hear for our city. Marcus, how do you, and I've asked this to a couple of guests recently, because I think, we're all a little bit different, but the idea of staying up to date on news and trends in the industry is so important, and particularly in your role as director of sales. How are you doing this? Are you just news? Is it daily email blasts from HSMAI and all the different organizations? I mean, what does your daily intake and your net look like to bring in trends and news and updates on the industry?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I definitely stay abreast on what I'm seeing in the news. I probably participate actually a little bit more, or spend more time now with the hospitality trade organization. So as you referenced, HSAMI, IHLA, PCMA, MPI, certainly spend quite a bit of time, because there's a lot of different, with everything evolving, I'll find different bits of pieces of different topics, strategies, trends, and then having a lot of different conversations with colleagues, our clients, meeting planners, really trying to take a lot of different avenues with this in terms of staying abreast and I guess on trend.
That's great. For people that are listening that want to go down this kind of sales route, you talked a little bit about how you went to hospitality school and some of your experience with the organizations you worked for before. What other kind of advice would you give to someone that is maybe already in the industry that's looking just to enhance some of their professional development, whether certifications, mini courses? Uh, what sort of advice would you give them to continuously stay sharp in their professional development of knowledge, skills, and abilities?
Yeah, always keep learning. Our industry is continuing to evolve, and so I think always keep learning. I think always, if you're in the industry and working and you're new into the industry, whether you want to break into sales or any other department, I think don't be afraid to express interest. Don't be afraid to don't be afraid to kind of challenge or question the norm. I'll tell you from my perspective, I certainly like to hire people who are a little bit different, who haven't maybe necessarily followed the same ways of doing business for the past 10 years. I like to, be challenged myself and learn from others. I think that's the way that we succeed well together, is by challenging and pushing each other. So I think just, be passionate about what you're wanting to do, and go for it. I guess back to the, always being learning. I myself, I'm taking time right now to do an online course to further my own education. I think we can all continue to stay educated, because there's different trends, as we're talking about right now, that continue to evolve. And so I certainly would support that. I know that DePaul has a great education that they offer in hospitality. And so I certainly would encourage just continued education.
Appreciate it. Appreciate the plug there. And
Yeah.
even us as teachers during this time, we always follow a kind of a guiding principle of a teacher never stops learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same way in the industry, because we don't know what the future holds, but I'm like you, I'm optimistic. Hospitality and tourism,
Mm-hmm.
listen, it's one of the world's largest industries. It's always going to be here. People are going to travel, whether it's for leisure or for business. And so the opportunities exist. Marcus Cornelious, you are the Director of Sales and Marketing for the Sheraton Grand. You've been there since 2016. Thanks so much for being on the Hospitality Spirit today.
Thanks so much, Nick. It was exciting to speak with you, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this and to talk about our industry, talk about, as you said, I think the optimism. We will get through this. So great conversation.
Wonderful.